This time on 10 movies. I have not filmed anything in like 4 months because I gave myself a bad haircut. From sibling rivalry, that's a word that is difficult for me in English, okay, because of the R's. I do this to myself. I choose these words to say. It's starting. Since spring is just around the corner and I feel like Lily Rostep from Nosferatu is staring at me having a seizure from the paleness of my reflection every time I look in a mirror, I've been thinking a lot about haunted women in movies. So I decided to put together a list of 10 movies with some memorable performances. It's important to mention that I am using a very loose definition of haunted when compiling this list, so not all of these movies will have a strictly ghostly aspect to them, but hopefully I've done a good enough job in explaining why every movie is on here. And with that being said, let's get into it.
Haven't they got any eyes? Have they forgotten what a star looks like?
We start off strong with Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard, an American classic from 1950, which is historically and culturally so significant that it usually ends up on any list referring to the greatest movies ever made. The film follows the relationship between Joe Gillis, a screenwriter in LA who is struggling to get by, and Norma Desmond, a former silent era film star who is having a bit of a difficult time making a comeback. The two strike up a strange symbiosis that we already at the start of the movie learn leads to tragedy. So all you have to do when watching this movie is let yourself be carried away by the iconic performances by Gloria Swanson and William Holden. Swanson herself starred in silent movies starting from 1918, many of which have been lost, and had struggled to transition her career when talkies first came around, giving her a level of understanding regarding the character that not everyone can have.
She breathed in that house so crowded with Norma Desmonds. More Norma Desmonds. And still more Norma Desmonds.
The way that Swanson was able to balance Desmond's controlling and emboldened personality with the vulnerability that comes from being discarded by the film industry and her fans is fantastic. And her Golden Globe winning performance still holds up even 75 years later. Swanson herself was in a way haunted by Norma after the success of the movie, as she felt the characters that she was offered seemed to reduce her to a parody of a parody, and she basically retired from acting in movies. Considering that Wilder had initially wanted to cast Mae West in this role, but who turned it down because she was offended to be asked to play a Hollywood has-been, I think it's interesting to consider how accepting a role affects the public perception of actors, especially when they are women, and how fame can have an effect on identity.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Probably one of the most iconic movies about a haunted woman, Black Sunday is a 1960 Italian Gothic horror film directed by Mario Bava and stars the iconic Barbara Steele as two characters, Asa, a vampiric witch, and Katya, a young woman whose life force Asa wants to drain. As per usual with these types of stories, Asa's undying rage comes from being sentenced to death for sorcery by the close men in her life, and her comeback is also rooted in the mistakes of men. Seriously, if you think that you're fucking something up, then at least you're probably not as bad as these guys checking out a witch's tomb. I personally love the drama and vulnerability of Steele's performance, and it's easy to understand why this movie catapulted her into stardom in the horror scene of the 60s and 70s. And if you're into that sort of thing, then the visual effects when it comes to the witch are also amazingly eerie. I actually only recently saw this film in English, as originally the DVD I had wouldn't play any other languages than, I think, Italian with German subtitles. So for a long time, I had no idea what was going on exactly because I don't speak any of those languages. But regardless, Steele's performance, along with the atmospheric visuals, always kept me hooked when watching it. If you have a chance, though, I do recommend to watch this in Italian with relevant subtitles because the English dub, I don't know, there was just something that made me laugh a number of times when it really wasn't that funny.
We still have 5 versts to go to Mirgorod.
I trust you will spend a good night at
Mirgorod.
This movie is considered to have had a massive influence on setting the standards for Italian horror. Many of its elements of contrasting pleasing and horrific visuals of graphic violence and eroticism can be recognized in the giallo genre.
Right away. Please, before she comes back.
In Robert Aldrich's 1962 psychological horror thriller, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Bette Davis and Joan Crawford star as Baby Jane Hudson, a former vaudeville child star, and her disabled older sister Blanche, who live in a decaying Hollywood mansion. In their youth, Jane's dwindling career as a child star and Blanche's promising career as a Hollywood actress threw a wrench in their relationship, and ever since Blanche's car accident, which left her in a wheelchair, the two have grown increasingly resentful towards each other. As reruns of Blanche's old movies begin to renew her popularity, Jane threatens to sell their house and commit her sister to a psychiatric hospital in an effort to reinvigorate her own stardom. The setup of these two characters is not only fascinating due to the writing, but also has an added layer thanks to the casting of Crawford and Davis, actresses who both had successful film careers for decades prior, and who also harbored a bitter resentment towards each other. I remember being completely captivated by this movie when I first saw it as a teenager, so that the big reveal at the very end made me watch it a second time with a completely different set of eyes. Similarly to Sunset Boulevard, which I spoke about earlier in this video, the performances of Davis and Crawford examine the position that older women hold in Hollywood and how the industry often requires you to hold on to the ghost of your former self in order to have any perceived value. From sibling rivalry and the effects of child stardom to the independence of people with disabilities and struggles with addiction, the mundaneness of the horror shown give ample of topics to ponder for those brave enough to step into this dilapidated Hollywood mansion.
I'd rather die than speak of that to anyone.
In this 1966 cult classic, the iconic Deborah Kerr stars as Catherine, a devoted wife to Philippe, the Marquis de Bellenac, who is the hereditary owner of an ancient estate in the French countryside. Eye of the Devil follows Catherine as she unearths the mysteries of her husband's family inheritance and discovers that he is involved in old pagan rituals that supposedly save the area's crops during dry seasons. While this movie definitely has some moments that made me laugh out loud, like when Carr's character spins around in horror and then hides in some vines, it also has scenes that left me shitless, like when she almost falls off the roof of the castle. Also, the next time someone asks why I don't have kids, I'm just gonna refer to Jacques, because what the hell, bro? What the hell? The film has a truly unsettling combination of editing and music, which to me makes it an enjoyable watch. I also love the camera work. The pans, the tilts, and intense zooms really highlight the grandeur of the location and create a sense of separation from the rest of civilization. Eye of the Devil was commercially unsuccessful upon its release, but has since gained cult status due to the involvement of Sharon Tate, who plays a local woman involved in the unnerving rituals. The movie was also effectively the last black and white movie produced by MGM, as it was released at the time where major studios were starting to use color film. But I'm personally happy to see this in black and white, as I think it really adds to the atmosphere. Moving geographically closer to my neck of the woods, V is a 1967 gothic horror fantasy film that was the first horror film that was officially released in the Soviet Union. The movie follows the story of Koma Brutus, a student from a Kiev seminary who brutally uses a stick to beat a witch that hypnotized him. The witch turns into a beautiful young woman just before he flees the scene, and he later finds out that she was the daughter of a local Sotnik who asks him to pray for her recovery. Sadly, the young woman dies before he arrives for the prayer, and the Sotnik promises Koma a big reward if he holds vigil and prays for her soul for 3 nights. Even though I'm not a big fan of the historical era in Eastern Europe that the film depicts, I don't know, it could be maybe the generational trauma or something, because I would quite literally rather eat my big toe than think about it, but I do enjoy this movie, actually. Not only is the story fascinating, the cinematography and editing are excellent, and there's just so much to pay attention to. The framing of many shots actually reminds me a little of Eggers' Nosferatu, and it's cool to see filmmakers incorporate landscape into the story in such a satisfying way. The visual effects regarding the witch are also incredible, and by the time we reach the 3rd night of the vigil, they are frankly out of this world. I wholeheartedly recommend anyone who is interested in costume and set design and practical effects to check it out, because it is wild. By the way, Black Sunday, which I mentioned earlier in this video, was actually based on the same story by Nikolai Gogol, so if you're keen to watch a double feature about haunted women, then these two might make a perfect pairing. I'm warm. I also haven't spoken to anyone in like days, which is gonna pan out really well for my pronunciation. How do normal people say it? The Woman of the Snow is a 1968 fantasy horror film from Japan. The story is based on a short story about Yuki Onna from the 1904 book Raiden, Stories and Studies of Strange Things, and follows the story of a sculpting apprentice who gets stuck in a forest with his master during a snowstorm. As they are resting, a woman appears in the abandoned cottage that they found shelter in and freezes his master to death. Before leaving, she threatens to come back and take his life too, unless he vows secrecy to what happened. This film does a fantastic job of incorporating the chilling power of nature into the narrative through its cinematography and visual effects. From the snow slopes that illuminate darkness to the snow witch devouring the last warmth of the sculptor, there's certainly a lot to indulge in when watching this movie. And as someone who grew up with dark winters with temperatures that range between -10 to -30 degrees Celsius, I definitely could feel the dread of the cold during the snow witch's scenes in my bones. Perhaps that was partially because of the sound effects and music, but it really does suck you into the scene. A visually spectacular horror and haunting love story packed into one, this film is great for anyone who appreciates Japanese folk horror that discusses family, legacy, and betrayal. We return to Italy with the 1977 supernatural horror film Suspiria, directed by acclaimed horror and giallo director Dario Argento. Starring Jessica Harper as an American ballet student who gets swept up in a series of murders while studying in a prestigious dance academy in West Germany, the film is considered a cult classic and has probably influenced your favorite horror filmmaker in some way. Known for its liberal use of blood and flamboyantly colorful set design and lighting, the film captures the viewer's attention by leaving its victims vulnerable to a mysterious witch's coven. Paired with an original score from the Italian progressive rock band Goblin, Suspiria remains unforgettable to many of its viewers. Checking out the reviews of this movie online, I saw quite a few that found it lacking in substance, and I can see where those opinions come from, but as someone who is very visually inclined, I haven't had any problem sitting through this movie numerous times. Though if you're squeamish when it comes to depictions of violence, then perhaps skip this one. Having worked in set design and as a gaffer myself, I find the visuals in this spectacular, and I think it's really cool to see filmmakers challenge the visual norms of dark tones in the horror genre, especially nowadays when many films come out practically unviewable due to studios trying to save money on lighting by relying on digital color correction and post-production. While writing this segment, I also remembered they made a remake of this film in 2018 starring Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton, and Mia Goth, but I haven't seen it yet. I was working in the box office of a small local cinema at the time, and I did sell quite a few tickets to people seeing it, but for some reason I just never got around to seeing it myself. Have you seen it? Is it worth a watch? Let me know. Maybe I will get my shit together and watch it. I will watch it at one point. It's the mañana. This Japanese comedy horror film by Nobuhiko Obayashi from 1977 is most likely unforgettable for anyone who has been lucky enough to see it. House follows a schoolgirl named Gorgeous and her 6 friends who travel to visit her aunt's home in the countryside. The girls come across many supernatural events, as it seems that the house is intent in devouring them all one by one. Obayashi, who was born in Hiroshima and lost many people from his life during the atomic bombing, incorporated themes of grief and loss in the script through the aunt's character, who turns into an evil spirit and devours the young girls due to their perceived purity and innocence. Famous for its use of unrealistic special effects and upbeat framing regarding the dark subject matter, this film really challenges the limits of imagination for the average adult, which can be argued is exactly what Obayashi set out to do, as he found inspiration for the film from his daughter, believing that adults only think about things they understand. Everything stays on that boring human level, and that children can come up with things that can't be explained. I, for one, have found a lot of inspiration from the editing in this film. The level of detail in each shot is incredible, and I definitely could make a whole video only focusing on the editing and effects. For example, I really love the flashback scene where Gorgeous tells her friends about her aunt's history while they're on the train. It has so many interesting creative choices. The moving landscape behind the girls that looks like a painting, the switch to sepia and then black and white through rolling film when we hear the aunt's story with the voices of the girls still echoing through, the title cards with dialogue as if we are watching a silent film, the burning of the film strip as a transition. I seriously could go on and on. Since its release, the film has reached cult status, and for good reason. Have you seen it already? If you have, let me know what you thought, because honestly, I love hearing people's thoughts on this. Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, or simply Lady Vengeance, depending on where you're looking, is a 2005 neo-noir psychological thriller by acclaimed South Korean director Park Chan-wook. The third installment of Park's Vengeance trilogy. The film stars Lee Young-ae as Lee Kwon-ya. Am I mispronouncing? I'm so sorry. A woman who was wrongfully imprisoned for 13 years for kidnapping and unaliving a 5-year-old boy. Upon her release, she sets out to find her child who was taken away and begins to seek revenge against the real murderer. This film has incredible storytelling, and the combination of cinematography, editing, and sound design make the story flow effortlessly. I certainly have a difficult time looking away every time that I've seen this movie. Depending on the version you are watching, the film also fades from bright, colorful imagery to black and white, which is a cool creative choice when it comes to the narrative. The first time I watched this, I saw the standard version, which remains fully in color, so when I saw the black and white version, I was a little confused, but to me, I feel like it had quite a significant effect on the storyline. But I don't know. If you've seen it, what do you think? I also love Lee Young-ae's performance. She is able to balance tragedy and resilience so well, while still winning me over immediately with that tofu scene in the very beginning of the movie. While definitely not for the faint of heart, I recommend this film to anyone who enjoys visual storytelling with disturbing and suspenseful themes mixed with poetic undertones. And finally, last, but certainly not least, we finished this list off with Jordan Peele's 2019 psychological horror film, Us. The narrative follows Adelaide Wilson and her family who, while on holiday, are attacked by a group of intruders called the Tethered, who look exactly like them, except a little more grotesque. The movie begs the age-old horror movie question: what if the call is coming from inside the house? Lupita Nyong'o, who stars as Adelaide, and her doppelganger Red, really brought her all to these roles, and I personally am still salty she didn't receive at least an Academy Award nomination for her performance. It is truly unnerving to see how the two characters interact and connect to each other under such tragic and stressful circumstances. Nyong'o's skillful use of voice modulation and dauntingly expressive eyes make this performance completely unforgettable to me. Grappling with themes of marginalization, classism, and trauma, the movie gives the viewer a chance to question their own position in society and wonder, what version of yourself will you find when you discover yourself in a house of mirrors? In my opinion, Peele is always able to strike up a fantastic balance of symbolism between the narrative devices and visuals that he uses, and Us is no exception in this regard. For example, the use of shadow in both the storytelling and cinematography gives the movie a very poetic feel. I'll finish the segment off with a quote from Peele that is perhaps as relevant now as it was in 2019. For us to have our privilege, someone suffers. That's where the tethered connection, I think, resonates the most, in that those who suffer and those who prosper are two sides of the same coin. You can never forget that. We need to fight for the less fortunate. That's it. I did it. That's today's 10 movies. Have you seen any of these? Which is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments if I missed anything interesting. I want to watch more movies. Okay, peace. Bye. Can I not say bye when I finish a video? No, I cannot. Okay.